The Galactic Council chamber was a place that few humans had ever seen. It was enormous, stretching so high that the ceiling disappeared into shadow, and lined with hundreds of seats, each one occupied by beings from different corners of the galaxy. Some were tall, some small, some had multiple limbs, some had wings or scales. Their languages and voices filled the hall with a constant murmur that sounded like a chorus of chaos. Today, however, the murmur was heavier, tense, almost suffocating, because the Council was about to decide the fate of the Zarvian species. The Zarvians were in no position to defend themselves. Their planet had been destroyed in a war they had not caused. Their cities had burned, their homes were gone, and their population reduced to scattered refugee ships drifting helplessly in space. Most of the Council members saw them as a threat, a species without a world, without power, without value. It was easy for them to vote for extermination. After all, from their perspective, a population without a planet was useless, and the survivors might one day return to cause trouble. At the center of the chamber, the Earth delegation sat quietly. Commander Elias Ward, a tall man with a calm but firm presence, looked at the sea of alien representatives before him. He could feel their eyes, some curious, some mocking, some filled with disdain. Many of them did not take humans seriously. Earth was considered a minor power, a world far away and weak compared to the major civilizations of the galaxy. But today that would not matter. Today humanity's voice would matter more than any politics or fear. When the vote began, representatives from almost every other planet raised their hands without hesitation. Each hand that went up seemed to crush the hope of the Zarvian people a little further. Elias watched silently, counting the votes in his mind. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. If he stayed silent, the vote would be unanimous, and 10,000 lives, or perhaps more, would end in an instant. Finally, it was his turn. The chamber went quiet. For a moment, the only sound was the soft hum of the Council's energy fields. Then Elias rose, his uniform crisp, his posture steady. Every eye turned to him. Some of the alien representatives whispered to each other, clearly expecting the humans to fall in line like the others. But Elias spoke, and his voice, though calm, echoed with conviction. "We will not vote for the extermination of the Zarvians," he said. The words sounded simple, but they carried a weight that the Council had not anticipated. There was an audible gasp. Murmurs turned into shouts. Some representatives laughed in disbelief. One of the larger insectoid delegates slammed its claw on the table, a gesture that humans would have interpreted as anger. "You dare defy the Council?" it demanded, its voice cracking like stone. Elias did not flinch. He could feel his heart pounding, but he held his ground. "I do," he said. "We refuse to participate in the destruction of an entire species. Mercy is not weakness. Compassion is not a crime. If you destroy them because they are weak, then what does that make us?" Some of the younger representatives looked confused, perhaps even ashamed. The older, more powerful ones merely sneered. One voice, sharp and metallic, spoke up. "You humans are sentimental fools. Do you realize what you are risking? Your planet will be shunned, your fleets attacked, your colonies ignored. Do you want all this for a species that may bring you nothing but trouble?" Elias knew the risk. He had been briefed on every consequence, every possible retaliation. But he could not allow fear to dictate morality. The Zarvians are not just some inconvenience or threat. They are living beings capable of thought, emotion, and hope. They have lost everything, and now we have the chance to save them. If we turn our backs, we become complicit in their destruction. That is a stain on our conscience we cannot remove. The chamber fell into a tense silence. Every representative knew this vote was different. For the first time in many cycles, a species had openly defied the consensus of the galaxy. Some were shocked, some were furious, and some, perhaps quietly, respected it. Elias felt the weight of history on his shoulders. The decision was no longer just about politics, it was about what it meant to be human. Behind him, on the large viewing screens, the faces of the Zarvians could be seen, projected from their tiny, failing ships. They were pale, fragile, and terrified. Their eyes, large and round, seemed to plead silently. Elias looked at them and made a promise he could feel in his bones. Humanity would not abandon them. The other representatives continued to shout and argue, some calling for sanctions against Earth, others threatening to expel them from the Council. Yet Elias did not retreat. He stayed firm, knowing that even if the vote went against them, he had taken a stand that mattered. For 10,000 lives, for morality, for hope, they would not be silent. When the vote finally concluded, the result was devastating. All other civilizations had voted for extermination. Only humans had stood against it. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted accusations of foolishness and arrogance. Some stormed out, while others tried to negotiate new rules to override the human vote. But no matter what they said, one fact remained. Humanity had refused to join in the execution of the innocent. Elias remained standing, exhausted, yet unbroken. He could feel the weight of the council's anger, but also a strange sense of quiet pride. Somewhere, deep in the void of space, the Zarvians must have heard of this act. Maybe, just maybe, they had hope. And hope, he knew, could carry a species farther than any weapon or fleet ever could. That night, the chamber emptied, leaving Elias alone in the echoing hall. The walls seemed cold, the shadows longer than before, yet in his heart he carried a small flame. Humans were now marked as outcasts, rebels in the eyes of the galaxy, but they had chosen to do the right thing. For Elias, for his crew, and for the Zarvians, that was enough. Across the stars, in the fragile hulls of drifting refugee ships, the Zarvians began to whisper their prayers. Some said a human had saved them, not with weapons, not with armies, but with courage and the refusal to commit an injustice. It was a quiet moment, almost invisible, yet it changed the course of their lives forever. And for humanity, it was only the beginning of a journey that would test every ounce of bravery, loyalty, and compassion they possessed. The Galactic Council had condemned the Zarvians. The other civilizations had voted unanimously for destruction. But one species, small and often underestimated, had said no, and sometimes saying no in the face of a universe that demands compliance is the bravest act of all. Weeks had passed since the vote in the Galactic Council, and the weight of their decision rested heavily on the humans. Commander Elias Ward could still feel it in his chest. The memory of every hand raised for extermination, every alien sneer, every whispered accusation of foolishness. Humanity had become a minor scandal in galactic politics. Most civilizations ignored Earth now, avoiding communication or trade, while others openly mocked their moral stance. Yet Elias knew that none of that mattered compared to what awaited him in the cold depths of space. The message came late at night, while Elias and his team were reviewing the fleet's status in the Earth Command Center. At first, it appeared as a simple transmission, tiny bursts of coded signals flickering across the screen. But then the translator processed the words and the room fell silent. The message was desperate, raw, and almost impossible to believe. It came from the Zarvian survivors, 10,000 refugees drifting in a cluster of damaged ships, caught near a dead moon, with dwindling food, failing life support systems, and nowhere left to go. Humans, the message said, the words punctuated by static. You are our last hope. Please, help us. Elias leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He had imagined this moment many times since the council vote, but now it was real. 10,000 lives hung in the balance, and they were calling on him, on humanity, for salvation. The others in the room looked uneasy. Some senior officers exchanged worried glances, thinking about politics, about sanctions, about what the council would do if they interfered. But Elias felt only one thing. He could not turn away. He immediately convened a meeting with the United Earth Council. The room was tense. The council chamber buzzed with fear and doubt. High-ranking officials, diplomats, and military advisors all voiced the same concerns. If we intervene, said one, we risk war with multiple galactic powers. Our trade routes could be blockaded. Our colonies could be attacked. Is it worth it for a species we barely know? Another argued, they are an unknown quantity. We could be inviting danger onto our own planet. Think of the consequences. Elias listened to their fears, but he could not accept them. He knew that fear often disguised itself as reason. He looked at the holographic projection of the Zarvian fleet, small and fragile against the vastness of space. Their ships were patched together from scraps, barely holding together, yet inside each one were lives, families, children. He imagined the terror in their eyes as they drifted aimlessly, knowing that almost every civilization in the galaxy wanted them dead. We are not here to weigh consequences, Elias said finally, his voice steady but firm. We are here to do what is right. These are living beings, innocent and helpless. We have a choice, and I say we cannot let fear stop us from saving them. If we do nothing, we become complicit in their destruction. That is a mark on our species that we cannot bear. The council remained divided. Some were swayed by Elias's conviction, but many were still hesitant. The risk of open rebellion against the Galactic Council was immense. Earth could be cut off from interstellar diplomacy, its fleets marked as traitors, its people labeled as enemies of the galaxy. But Elias was not alone. Among the humans, there were always those who understood that courage often required defiance, and loyalty sometimes meant risking everything. Elias reached out to two of his closest allies, Dr. Lena Zhao, a xenobiologist who had spent years studying Zarvian culture, and Captain Marcus Dane, a cargo ship pilot known for daring maneuvers in hostile space. Both had seen humanity's moral compass shine through in the darkest of times. Lena, with her deep empathy and understanding of alien life, was the perfect person to communicate with the fragile and terrified Zarvians. Marcus, experienced in piloting under impossible conditions, would ensure that the rescue mission had the best chance of success. Together, the three of them began to plan something that was unprecedented, a human-led operation to save an entire species, defying the Council and risking Earth itself. They began quietly recruiting volunteers. Ordinary citizens, engineers, medics, navigators, and even students with knowledge of alien technology came forward. They were motivated not by politics or reward, but by the belief that no life should be left to die simply because others decided it was inconvenient. The volunteers trained for weeks in secret, preparing to journey into the unknown void of space with only hope as their guide. Supplies were gathered, ships were modified for speed and stealth, and communication protocols were established to avoid detection by the Council's enforcement fleets. Every night, Elias would sit in the command center, staring at the star map that marked the location of the drifting Zarvian fleet. He imagined the refugees huddled in their failing ships, children crying, the elderly struggling to breathe, families clinging to each other in fear. Each star on the map was a story, each light a life that could be extinguished without action. His resolve hardened with each passing day. Humanity had made its choice once in the council chamber. They had voted against extermination. Now it was time to act on that choice. The night of departure came with a tense quiet. The human convoy consisted of a mix of government freighters, privately owned vessels, and converted research ships. Their lights were dimmed, engines silent to avoid drawing attention. Families waved goodbye to the volunteers, knowing that many might never return. The volunteers themselves were a mix of fear and determination. Some were terrified, others filled with a strange exhilaration that comes from doing what no one else dares. As the fleet left Earth's orbit, Elias addressed them over the intercom. "We are going into dangerous space," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "We do not know what we will encounter, but we do know one thing. We are not abandoning those who cannot save themselves. Every step we take, every risk we face is for them. We are humanity at its best. Remember that." The journey began in silence, broken only by the soft hum of engines and the occasional technical check. Every human aboard knew the stakes. There were no guarantees. The Galactic Council could dispatch fleets at any moment to intercept them. Other civilizations might see them as criminals or fools. And yet the thought of turning back was unimaginable. The Zarvians were out there desperate and alone, waiting for someone brave enough to care. As days turned into nights in the void of space, the convoy faced the first of many challenges. Navigation was tricky, as the map data was outdated and the refugees' ships moved slowly. Communication with the Zarvian fleet was intermittent, often lost in bursts of static, leaving long stretches of uncertainty. Volunteers worked tirelessly, adjusting course, repairing shields, and rationing supplies. The closer they got, the more palpable the tension became. Each moment without contact felt like a life hanging in the balance. Finally, a faint signal appeared on the scanners, a flickering, broken transmission. It was the Zarvian fleet. Thousands of small ships, barely functional, drifting in formation that was more instinct than coordination. Their lights were dim, their engines sputtering, and their crews exhausted. The sight was heartbreaking. Lena's eyes filled with tears as she read the fragmented messages from the refugees. Pleas for help, whispers of hope, and cries of fear. "Humans are coming," one message said. "Maybe we will live." In that moment, the purpose of everything the humans had risked crystallized. This was not about politics, not about fear, not about defiance for its own sake. It was about lives. It was about hope, The volunteers knew that nothing in the galaxy's laws could compel them to save these aliens. Yet here they were, ready to risk everything because it was the right thing to do. Elias looked at his crew, his eyes meeting those of Marcus and Lena. A silent understanding passed between them. They had come too far to turn back now. Every decision, every sacrifice had led to this moment. Humanity's stand in the council chamber had been only the beginning. Now they would act not with weapons or domination, but with courage, skill, and compassion. The convoy moved closer, careful and deliberate, ready to meet 10,000 souls whose fate had rested entirely in the hands of a species willing to defy the universe. And for the first time in weeks, a fragile spark of hope lit the cold expanse of space, not just for the Zarvians, but for humanity itself, proving that mercy and courage could shine even in the darkest of places. Oceanal and engaging English, keeping it interesting and immersive. The journey through space was nothing like the humans had ever experienced. Even with all their preparation, the convoy soon discovered that the void between Earth and the drifting Zarvian fleet was far more dangerous than they had imagined. There were no welcoming stars or guiding beacons, only the silent darkness of interstellar space, dotted with asteroids, unstable debris fields, and occasional rogue energy storms that could tear a ship apart in moments. For the humans aboard, every second was a mixture of fear, concentration, and hope, a strange cocktail that left no room for rest. Commander Elias Ward moved through the control room of the lead ship, checking instruments, reviewing navigational coordinates, and constantly communicating with the fleet. Even though their route had been planned meticulously, reality demanded constant adjustment. The Zarvian fleet was not a single organized force. It was thousands of small damaged ships barely able to maintain orbit or course. Some of them were stuck in decaying gravitation fields, while others floated with engines that were sputtering and failing. Elias could feel the weight of responsibility pressing on him like gravity itself. If one ship was lost, it could mean lives, hundreds, perhaps thousands of lives. Captain Marcus Dane, piloting one of the faster vessels in the convoy, was the first to encounter real danger. A patrol from the Zarketh Empire, one of the Council's most aggressive enforcers, had spotted them near the Threx Nebula. The Zarketh ships were sleek, armed with plasma cannons, and built for one thing: destruction. Marcus knew that they could not outrun these ships under normal circumstances, but he also knew the asteroid field ahead offered a slim chance of survival. Without hesitation, he guided the convoy toward the dense field of floating rock and metal, weaving through the asteroids at impossible speeds. 2 smaller human ships were hit and lost, sending alarms screaming through the fleet, but the majority made it through intact, shaken but alive. Inside the cargo bays of the human ships, the volunteers worked tirelessly to maintain the fragile integrity of the fleet. Engineers patched minor hull breaches, medics treated minor injuries, and navigators recalculated courses constantly. Lena Zhao moved from ship to ship, offering encouragement, translating messages from the Zarvian scouts who had begun to establish intermittent communication, and helping the refugees who had managed to send signals ahead. Each day was a mixture of exhaustion and adrenaline, a test not only of skill but of willpower. The closer they drew to the Zarvian fleet, the more difficult the journey became. The refugees' ships were scattered over a wide area, drifting in an irregular pattern. Some had lost power entirely, while others were slowly spinning, their life support systems barely keeping oxygen levels stable. When a human scout ship reached one of these disabled vessels, the sight was heartbreaking. Children clutched each other, whispering quietly, and parents moved desperately to comfort them even though their own fear was clear in their eyes. Many adults were too weak to operate their controls, relying entirely on the humans for rescue. Elias felt a lump in his throat. This was why they had risked everything. This was why humanity had chosen to act when the galaxy had refused. Communication between the fleets was challenging. The Zarvians' technology was different, unfamiliar, and in some cases incompatible with human systems. Signals were often garbled or lost entirely. Yet even with the difficulty, messages of hope began to pass back and forth. "We see you," one Zarvian child's voice said, trembling over the static. "We did not believe anyone would come." Lena, translating, whispered to herself, "We are here. We are not leaving you." Even in the face of exhaustion, she felt a surge of emotion. It was rare, she thought, for species so different to find understanding. But now it was happening, and it felt miraculous. Despite the growing hope, danger was never far away. Council enforcers patrolled nearby sectors looking for any sign of defiance from Earth. The humans had to remain hidden, running dark, and using every trick Marcus knew to avoid detection. At one point, a Council drone caught a glimpse of the convoy, firing warning blasts that sent shivers through the fleet. Marcus and his team managed to evade it by diving through a volatile magnetic storm, a risky maneuver that required perfect timing. A miscalculation would have ripped several ships apart. Still, the mission pressed forward, each narrow escape strengthening the bond between humans and the Zarvian refugees, who watched in awe as the humans risked everything to reach them. When the first human vessels finally reached the Zarvian fleet, it was an emotional moment none would forget. Thousands of fragile ships floated in silence, their lights dim, their engines sputtering. The human ships maneuvered carefully among them, offering repairs, rations, and life support supplies. Volunteers delivered food packs, medical kits, and warm blankets, small acts of humanity that meant the world to those who had survived so long in darkness and fear. Children pressed their faces to the viewing screens, seeing beings so different from themselves yet willing to risk everything to save them. Parents whispered thanks, tears flowing freely, and some simply fell to their knees in relief and exhaustion. Elias moved among the fleet, coordinating rescues and ensuring that no ship was left behind. He spoke through the comms to every survivor he could reach, assuring them that help had come at last. "You are not forgotten," he said. "We are here to bring you home. Hold on, and we will make sure every one of you survives." Even though he was speaking calmly, his own voice shook with the weight of responsibility and the emotion of seeing so many lives clinging to hope. For Lena, the emotional impact was overwhelming. She had studied the Zarvians for years, reading about their culture, learning their history, understanding their fears and dreams. Yet nothing had prepared her for the reality of seeing them so vulnerable and fragile. Every interaction was poignant. An elderly Zarvian reaching trembling hands toward her, a child clutching her hand for warmth, families whispering prayers in a language she barely understood. She spent hours moving between ships, offering care, comfort, and translation, becoming a bridge between two species who might never have met under peaceful circumstances. The human fleet worked tirelessly, day and night, repairing the Zarvian vessels and guiding them into a safe formation for the journey back toward Earth. It was a slow process, requiring coordination, skill, and immense patience. Volunteers slept only a few hours at a time. Engineers improvised solutions with whatever scraps were available, and medics treated injuries that were often the result of months of neglect and fear. Yet despite exhaustion, there was an undeniable sense of purpose among the humans. Each life saved was a triumph, each successful repair a victory against the odds. As the rescued ships began to move under human guidance, a quiet sense of hope spread among the Zarvians. They had almost given up. They had thought the galaxy had abandoned them entirely. And now, as fragile as it seemed, there was hope. Hope that someone, somewhere, cared enough to act. "They are saving us," whispered a Zarvian mother to her child, tears glistening in her eyes. "We are not alone anymore." Elias, Marcus, and Lena watched as the fleet moved cautiously, step by step, toward safety. The journey was far from over, and dangers still awaited them. Council enforcers could intercept them at any moment. Supplies were limited, and the sheer distance to Earth would test endurance, courage, and resourcefulness. Yet in that moment, none of that mattered. The first step had been taken. Humanity had reached out across the stars and touched the lives of a species that had been written off, proving that compassion could shine even in the darkest void of space. And for the first time in weeks, Elias allowed himself a small, quiet smile. They had come for the Zarvians. They had risked everything, faced dangers that would have terrified even the bravest of species, and reached the very beings they had sworn to protect. The journey ahead would be long and dangerous, but this was the moment when hope had returned, not just for the Zarvians, but for humanity, showing the galaxy what it meant to act with courage, compassion, and unwavering determination. The journey toward Earth, which had started with hope and courage, soon became a race against time and danger. As the human-led convoy carried the Zarvian refugees through space, news of their defiance spread across the galaxy. The Galactic Council was furious. Humanity had ignored their authority, risked open rebellion, and rescued a species that had been officially condemned to death. Officially, Earth was now a renegade world, and the Council did not hesitate to send fleets to intercept the convoy. They considered this act not just foolish, but an outright challenge to their power, and they wanted to make an example of humanity. Back on Earth, the leaders faced a storm of fear and debate. Military advisors warned of war, economists warned of isolation, and diplomats warned that the Council could impose severe sanctions or even attack. There were those who argued that Earth should surrender the refugees immediately to avoid catastrophe. Yet ordinary citizens, unafraid of the political implications, began to take to the streets in protest. Across cities, millions marched under banners that read, "Mercy is not treason," and "We will protect life." People from every walk of life, students, workers, teachers, and parents, made it clear that they would not let the refugees be turned away. Inside the convoy, the humans and Zarvians were aware of the danger, but had no choice but to keep moving. Council destroyers were closing in, their massive ships cutting through space like predatory shadows. The humans had to be strategic. Marcus Dane, piloting the lead ship, used every trick in his arsenal to evade them. He led the convoy through asteroid fields, magnetic storms, and narrow gravitational passes, each maneuver more dangerous than the last. At one point, the Council ships fired warning blasts, forcing the convoy into evasive patterns that tested both ship and crew to their limits. Several smaller human vessels were damaged, and the volunteers worked tirelessly, repairing hulls, stabilizing life support, and comforting terrified refugees. Despite the danger, morale remained high among the humans and Zarvians. The refugees had never felt hope like this before. Children who had spent weeks in fear finally laughed as they clung to blankets or small toys handed out by human volunteers. Elders whispered thanks in their strange melodic language, tears falling freely. For many, it was the first time in years that they had felt safe, if only temporarily. Lina Zhao moved among the refugees, translating, offering comfort and helping them understand the humans' plan. Each small act of care strengthened the fragile trust between the species. As the convoy moved closer to Earth's sector, the danger escalated further. The Council had dispatched a fleet of destroyers specifically to intercept them, planning to either capture or destroy the entire human-led convoy. Elias knew that fighting was unavoidable. There was no negotiating with a force that considered them criminals for showing compassion. The humans prepared their defenses, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. The Council's ships were built for war. While the human fleet was primarily designed for transport and rescue, they would need every ounce of strategy, courage, and ingenuity to survive. In a moment of desperation, Marcus made a daring decision. The convoy approached a gas giant with a dense gravitational field. Flying into its orbit was extremely dangerous, but it offered a potential advantage. Marcus led a portion of the Council's pursuing fleet into the planet's unstable gravitational currents. Some ships were crushed or forced to retreat, giving the human convoy precious minutes to move farther along the route. Marcus's ship, the fastest and most agile in the convoy, was heavily damaged during the maneuver and eventually had to be abandoned. The human volunteers mourned him, knowing that his sacrifice had saved countless lives and given the convoy a critical chance to survive. Earth itself became a stage for the rebellion. Citizens across the planet, inspired by the bravery of the humans in space, demanded that their government act to protect the refugees. People organized emergency shelters, food supplies, and medical assistance. Communication networks buzzed with volunteers offering ships, pilots, and supplies. Millions of humans, ordinary citizens who had never been involved in interstellar affairs, now found themselves part of a movement driven by compassion and courage. They did not care about the Council's threats. They cared about life. In orbit above Earth, the convoy approached a critical point. The Council's destroyers had regrouped and were preparing to strike. Every volunteer, every refugee, every human aboard the fleet knew that a battle was inevitable. Elias Ward, calm but tense, coordinated the final defenses. Using their knowledge of the Council's tactics, they set up decoys, employed stealth maneuvers, and relied on the bravery of every crew member to protect the refugees. The tension was palpable. Every second felt like a lifetime, and every decision could mean survival or annihilation. Then, something extraordinary happened. Defense stations across Earth, previously passive or aligned with official orders, suddenly activated their weapons, not to attack the refugees, but to target the incoming Council fleet. The humans on the ground and in orbit had taken a stand, declaring their support for life. The Council destroyers were caught off guard, unprepared for resistance from an entire planet. Their calculations had assumed compliance or submission. They had not counted on humanity's determination to protect the helpless. The battle that followed was tense but brief. The Council ships, surprised and outmaneuvered, were forced to retreat. Some were damaged or destroyed, but most escaped back to distant sectors, their pride wounded more than anything else. The human convoy, battered but intact, continued toward Earth, carrying the refugees closer to safety with every passing moment. For the first time, both humans and Zarvians felt a sense of relief, a recognition that their courage, determination, and unity had paid off. During the final stretch toward Earth, volunteers in the fleet worked tirelessly to stabilize life support systems, repair engines, and coordinate landing procedures. The refugees, who had spent weeks drifting in fear, now whispered words of gratitude in their melodic language, some smiling for the first time since the destruction of their home planet. Children clutched blankets, pets, and small toys, while elders pressed their hands against screens or windows, feeling the warmth of human presence even before reaching Earth. Elias, Lena, and Marcus's leadership had been tested to its limits, and the results were clear. Humanity had not only defied the Council, but had proven that courage, compassion, and action could overcome fear and oppression. Even as the convoy approached Earth's orbit, Elias reflected on the long journey, the sacrifices made, and the lives saved. Every narrow escape, every tense maneuver, every tear shed had led to this moment. Humanity had chosen the side of life, and the galaxy would never forget it. By the time the fleet reached the outskirts of Earth's shelter zones, the planet below had become a symbol of hope and refuge. Millions of humans watched from orbiting satellites, cities, and villages as the convoy prepared to descend. For the first time, the Zarvians could see a world willing to welcome them, not with fear or judgment, but with open arms. The sense of relief was overwhelming. Tears flowed freely, and whispered prayers of thanks filled the corridors of the human ships. Elias looked at the approaching planet, thinking about everything that had happened. The vote in the Council chamber, the long journey through hostile space, the sacrifices made, and the hope rekindled in the hearts of the refugees. He knew the battle was not entirely over. Integration, care, and rebuilding would take time. But for now, humanity had done what was right. They had defied a galaxy and chosen compassion over compliance, life over indifference. And as the convoy prepared for landing, the humans and Zarvians shared a quiet but powerful understanding. Together, they had survived the impossible. The human-led convoy had finally reached the outskirts of Earth's orbit, and the first glimmers of the planet below brought a mixture of awe and relief to both the humans and the Zarvian refugees. From above, Earth glowed blue and green, a living, breathing world unlike anything many of the Zarvians had ever seen. The oceans reflected sunlight like liquid crystal, the forests stretched endlessly in vibrant green, and the cities shimmered with lights that marked life, civilization, and hope. For many of the refugees who had known only destruction and fear for so long, the sight was almost too much to take in. Some wept openly, pressing their hands to the viewing screens, as if they could touch the planet with their palms and finally feel safe. As the convoy began its descent, volunteers and crew members worked tirelessly to prepare for landing. Every human aboard knew that this was the culmination of everything they had risked and endured. They coordinated with Earth-based teams who had been ready for weeks, lining up landing zones, medical stations, temporary shelters, and food supplies. Civilians who had previously only observed the rescue operation from afar were now active participants, waving flags, lighting beacons, and sending messages of welcome to the refugees. The energy on Earth was electric. People had organized themselves, showing an extraordinary unity that reflected the bravery and moral courage of the humans who had first defied the Council. The first ships touched down gently on designated landing zones, their landing struts crunching softly into Earth's soil. Zarvian families emerged slowly, hesitantly at first, still unsure if the safety they had been promised was real. Children clutched each other's hands, their wide eyes reflecting both fear and wonder. The humans greeted them with smiles, gestures, and words of reassurance, even though language barriers remained. Volunteers offered warm blankets, water, food rations, and small tokens of comfort, simple gestures that carried immense significance. For the Zarvians, it was a world of compassion they had never imagined could exist outside their destroyed homes. Among the first refugees to step onto Earth was a young Zarvian girl, no more than 7 years old. She paused at the edge of the landing platform, her small hands pressed into the soil as if testing its warmth. Her wide eyes filled with tears, and she whispered in her soft melodic language, "Warm, alive, safe." Nearby, her parents knelt beside her, bowing their heads in quiet gratitude. Humans looked on with deep emotion, understanding that this small moment represented the survival of an entire species. It was not just a landing. It was a new beginning, a chance to rebuild, and a profound validation of humanity's courage and morality. Elias Ward stood among the volunteers, overseeing the landing and the distribution of supplies. He felt a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and quiet pride. Every decision he had made, every risk taken, every tense maneuver in hostile space had led to this moment. The Zarvians were safe, and for the first time in many cycles they could begin to imagine life beyond fear and survival. He watched as humans guided families toward medical stations, temporary shelters, and gathering areas where they could rest and begin to plan for their new lives. The scale of the operation was massive, yet it ran smoothly because of the dedication and unity of everyone involved. Lena Zhao moved among the refugees, helping children find care, translating between languages, and offering comfort to those too traumatized to speak. Every smile she received in return felt like a reward. She observed families talking softly among themselves, elders sharing stories, and even some of the younger Zarvians beginning to play small games, a sign that they were beginning to trust their new environment. Lena realized that the rescue had been more than a mission. It had been a bridge between two species, a chance to teach compassion, trust, and hope. Even as the refugees settled, humans and Zarvians began to work together to organize their new lives. Scientists and engineers collaborated to repair and repurpose the refugee ships, while families shared knowledge, food, and skills. Children from both species began to play together, learning each other's games, languages, and traditions. Slowly, a community formed, one built not on fear or survival, but on mutual respect, understanding, and the recognition that life itself was precious. Elias took a quiet moment to reflect on everything that had happened. From the council chamber vote to the harrowing journey through hostile space, to the narrow escapes and sacrifices along the way, humanity had chosen a difficult path. They had risked war, defiance, and isolation for the sake of life, and now that courage had borne fruit. The sight of the Zarvian refugees on Earth, healthy and alive, was a testament to what could be achieved when morality and bravery were chosen over fear and complacency. The impact of this rescue was felt far beyond the immediate landing zones. Across the globe, humans followed updates and broadcasts of the operation, realizing that their species had done something extraordinary. News outlets, social media channels, and community gatherings all buzzed with stories of courage, sacrifice, and hope. People celebrated the volunteers, acknowledging their bravery, but also recognized a deeper truth. Humanity's choice to protect life had created a ripple effect, inspiring hope across the galaxy. In the weeks following the landing, Earth became a true sanctuary for the Zarvians. Cities, towns, and rural areas alike welcomed the refugees, providing housing, work, and education. Governments coordinated aid programs while civilians offered personal resources. The Zarvians, for their part, shared their knowledge, culture, and art, enriching Earth in ways no one had imagined. Slowly, they began to heal from the trauma of losing their planet and their home, finding not only safety, but also friendship, trust, and community among humans. The emotional moments were countless. One elderly Zarvian woman, unable to speak the human language, pressed her hands together in a gesture of gratitude and bowed to the volunteers who had helped her family. Children learned human words quickly, laughing and shouting as they explored parks and streets for the first time. Families embraced, shared meals, and began to plant gardens, a symbol of life and renewal. Humanity had not only saved them, it had given them a chance to live fully again. To commemorate the rescue and the courage shown, Earth erected a monument in the capital city. It depicted two hands reaching toward each other, one human, one Zarvian. Beneath the statue was a simple inscription: "When all others turned away, humanity opened its door." The monument became a symbol of hope, compassion, and moral courage, a reminder that even in the face of fear, oppression, and galactic pressure, the choice to do what is right could change the course of history. Elias, standing before the monument months later, thought of the long journey, the risks, the sacrifices, and the lives saved. The Zarvians had found shelter, safety, and a new beginning on Earth, and humanity had proven something essential about itself. That morality, courage, and compassion were not weaknesses, but the true strength of a species. In the quiet moments, watching children from both worlds play together, hearing elders share stories, and witnessing families rebuild, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The galaxy had tried to condemn the Zarvians, to erase them from existence. The Council had expected humans to comply, to act in accordance with fear and political convenience. But humanity had chosen differently. They had risked everything, defied a powerful authority, and shown that life, every life, matters. And in doing so, they had not only saved 10,000 souls, but had created a legacy that would inspire generations to come. As the sun rose over Earth, casting light on the landing zones, the Zarvian children laughed and ran among the humans, their eyes bright with wonder. Families gathered together, sharing meals, stories, and hope. Volunteers worked tirelessly, not for reward, but for the knowledge that they had done what was right. And in that moment, the world felt like a place where anything was possible, where courage could defy fear and where compassion could bridge the vastness of the galaxy itself. For Elias, Lena, Marcus, and everyone who had been part of the rescue, the mission was complete. The Zarvians were safe. The humans had shown the galaxy what it meant to act with bravery, morality, and heart, and as the refugees looked toward the sky, toward the stars from which they had been saved, they understood that the warmth, hope, and shelter they had found on Earth would endure for generations. Life had been preserved, courage had been rewarded, and a new chapter had begun, not only for the Zarvians but for humanity itself.